You could only choose a handful of movements, just a handful, to protect your independence for the next 20 or 30 years. Which ones would actually matter most? Not the exercises you see influencers doing in crowded gyms, not complicated routines requiring equipment you'd need to buy and store somewhere. I'm talking about a small, specific set of movements that physical therapists and geriatric researchers keep coming back to again and again because they target exactly what tends to decline first as we age, and exactly what determines whether you're still climbing stairs confidently, still gardening, still picking up your grandchildren 20 years from now. Today, I'm going to walk you through 6 of these exercises. Simple, safe for most people to try, requiring little to no equipment, and each one chosen specifically because of what it protects in your body. I'll explain the science behind each one, share a real patient story, and give you clear, practical guidance you can actually use. Stay with me until the very end, because exercise number 1 on this list is the one geriatric specialists tell me they'd choose above all others if they could only recommend a single movement to someone over 60. Hello, and thank you for spending this time with me today. I'm Dr. Richard Williamson. I've spent more than 20 years working in emergency medicine, and throughout that time, I've cared for patients across the entire spectrum of physical aging. I've treated people in their 80s who moved with remarkable strength and confidence, and I've cared for people in their early 60s whose bodies had declined far more than their calendar age would suggest. Here's something I've come to believe deeply after decades of this work. The difference, more often than not, comes down to movement, not extreme fitness, not intense training, but consistent, targeted movement, practiced patiently over years. The exercises I'm sharing with you today aren't flashy. They won't make for dramatic before and after photos, but they target exactly the physical capabilities that most directly determine independence, safety, and quality of life as the years go on. Before we begin, I want to be honest with you. As always, everything shared today is general health information drawn from clinical experience and established exercise science. It's not a personalized exercise prescription, and it doesn't replace guidance from your own doctor or a physical therapist who can assess your specific joints, your balance, your medical history, and guide you toward what's genuinely appropriate and safe for your body. If you have any existing health conditions, joint concerns, or balance issues, please have a conversation with them before beginning any new exercise routine. Let's begin our countdown. Number 6 on our list is the wall push-up. And I want to start here because this exercise addresses something many people over 60 don't realize is quietly declining: upper body strength, particularly in your chest, shoulders, and arms. Here's why this matters. Upper body strength plays a far bigger role in daily independence than most people realize. Pushing open a heavy door, rising from the floor using your arms for support, catching yourself properly if you begin to stumble forward. All of these rely significantly on the same muscle groups engaged during a push-up motion. Here's the science, simplified. As we age, we naturally tend to lose muscle mass more in our upper body than many people expect, partly because daily activities so often emphasize our legs, walking, standing, climbing stairs, while our upper body muscles get comparatively less use unless specifically exercised. This gradual decline can make everyday pushing and pressing movements considerably more difficult over time. The wall push-up offers a wonderfully gentle entry point, engaging these same muscle groups without the intensity or joint strain of a traditional floor push-up, which many people over 60 find genuinely uncomfortable or risky for their wrists and shoulders. Here's exactly how to do it. Stand facing a sturdy wall, about arm's length away. Place your palms flat against the wall, at roughly shoulder height and shoulder width apart. Keeping your body in a relatively straight line from head to heels, slowly bend your elbows, lowering your chest toward the wall, similar to a standing push-up motion. Then, slowly push back to your starting position. Repeat this 10 to 15 times, resting as needed between repetitions. I think of a patient, a man named Charles, 68 years old. who mentioned during a visit that he'd recently struggled pushing open the heavy door at his local hardware store, something that genuinely surprised him since he'd never had trouble with it before. When we discussed his overall activity, it became clear his exercise routine focused almost entirely on walking, wonderful for cardiovascular health, but leaving his upper body strength somewhat neglected. We introduced wall push-ups into his routine 3 times weekly, gradually increasing his repetitions as his strength improved. After about 8 weeks, Charles mentioned with genuine satisfaction that the hardware store door felt effortless again, and he'd also noticed general tasks around his home. Moving furniture slightly, lifting boxes felt noticeably easier as well. I want to reassure you, if wall push-ups feel challenging at first, that's completely normal. And please adjust your hand position further from the wall for an easier version, or closer for more challenge as your strength develops over time. If you have any shoulder or wrist concerns, please check with your doctor or physical therapist before beginning this exercise. They may suggest helpful modifications specific to your situation. Now, let's move to our 5th exercise, something that addresses a completely different but equally important physical capability. Number 5 on our list is the seated marching exercise, and I want to explain why this simple movement carries such significant value, particularly for people who may have some mobility limitations or balance concerns. Here's the science behind why this matters. This exercise specifically engages your hip flexor muscles, the muscles responsible for lifting your knees, which play a crucial role in walking safely, particularly when it comes to clearing your feet properly over uneven surfaces, curbs, or small obstacles like a rug edge. Weakness in these muscles is associated in various studies with increased tripping and fall risk, since insufficiently lifting your foot during a step is one of the most common mechanisms behind trips and falls in older adults. Here's exactly how to do this exercise safely. Sit in a sturdy armless chair with your feet flat on the floor and your back straight. Slowly lift one knee up toward your chest as high as comfortably possible, then slowly lower it back down. Repeat with the other leg. Continue alternating legs in a marching motion for about 1 to 2 minutes, moving at a comfortable, controlled pace rather than rushing. I recall a patient, a woman named Eleanor, 73 years old, who'd experienced a stumble a few months earlier, catching her foot on a small rug edge in her hallway, something that had shaken her confidence considerably, even though she hadn't been seriously injured. When we discussed her situation and performed some basic strength assessments together, it became clear her hip flexor strength had declined somewhat, likely contributing to that incomplete foot clearance during her stumble. We introduced seated marching into her daily routine, practicing for a couple of minutes most mornings while watching the news. After about 6 weeks of this consistent practice, Eleanor mentioned she felt noticeably more confident navigating her home and had successfully avoided a similar near stumble on that same troublesome rug edge, something she attributed directly to feeling stronger and more in control of her foot placement. I want to reassure you, this exercise is genuinely gentle and accessible for most people, even those managing some balance concerns, since it's performed safely while seated. If you experience any hip discomfort during this movement, please ease back the range of motion or discuss this with your doctor or physical therapist for personalized guidance. Now let's move to our 4th exercise, something that addresses a movement pattern most people perform dozens of times daily, often without realizing how much strength it actually requires. Number 4 on our list is the sit to stand exercise, something we touched on briefly in a previous conversation, but which deserves dedicated attention here, specifically as one of the most important functional exercises for people over 60. Here's why this matters so significantly. This single movement, rising from a seated position to standing, relies heavily on your quadriceps, the large muscles in the front of your thighs, along with your glutes and core working together. This combination of muscles is essential for so many daily activities: getting up from your favorite chair, rising from the toilet, climbing out of your car, and perhaps most importantly, recovering safely if you find yourself sitting down suddenly during a stumble or loss of balance. Here's the science, simplified further. Research consistently associates the ability to rise from a seated position without using your hands, or with only mild use of hand support, with meaningfully lower fall risk and greater overall functional independence as people age. This makes sense when you consider how frequently this movement occurs throughout an average day, dozens of times, often without any conscious thought at all. Here's exactly how to practice this exercise intentionally. Sit in a sturdy chair with your feet flat on the floor, positioned slightly behind your knees rather than straight out in front. Lean slightly forward from your hips, then push through your heels to stand up, using your leg muscles as the primary source of power, rather than relying heavily on your arms or momentum. Slowly lower yourself back down to a seated position, with control, rather than simply dropping into the chair. Repeat this 8 to 12 times, resting as needed. I think of a patient, a man named Bernard, 69 years old, who mentioned somewhat sheepishly that he'd developed a habit of using both hands on the arms of his chair every single time he stood up, something that had become so automatic he hadn't fully registered how much he was relying on it. We discussed practicing this movement intentionally, without hand support initially attempting it, and using hand support only as needed rather than automatically. Bernard practiced this most days, gradually reducing his reliance on his hands as his leg strength improved. After about 10 weeks, he proudly mentioned that he could rise from his recliner using only minimal hand support, a meaningful change from his previous habit. I want to reassure you, if you currently rely heavily on your hands to stand up, that's completely fine, and there's no need to feel any concern about it. This exercise simply offers a way to gradually build the strength to rely on your hands less, at whatever pace feels comfortable and safe for your own body. Now let's move to our third exercise, something that addresses a physical capability that becomes increasingly important with each passing year, but which many people never specifically train. Number 3 on our list is the single leg stance, something we've discussed in a previous conversation as well, but which earns its place on this particular list because of how directly it connects to fall prevention, one of the most significant health concerns for adults over 60. Here's the science, simplified. Balance relies on a complex coordination between your inner ear, your vision, and something called proprioception, your body's internal sense of where your limbs are positioned in space. As we age, all three of these systems can become somewhat less precise, and practicing single leg balance specifically challenges and helps maintain this coordination. Here's exactly how to practice this safely. Stand near a wall or sturdy countertop for support. Lift one foot slightly off the ground, bending your knee, and hold this position for as long as feels comfortable and controlled, ideally working toward 20 to 30 seconds over time. Lower your foot, rest briefly, then repeat on the other side. I recall a patient, a man named Arthur, 71 years old, who came to see me after a minor stumble in his garage, and when we practiced this test together, he could only manage about 7 seconds before needing to grab support. We introduced simple, consistent practice, standing on one leg while brushing his teeth each morning and evening near his bathroom counter for safety. After about 8 weeks, Arthur's balance time had improved considerably, and he mentioned feeling noticeably steadier walking on uneven ground during his regular walks, a change that gave him genuine peace of mind. I want to reassure you, balance, much like strength, responds well to simple, consistent practice. If your own balance feels limited today, please don't be discouraged. This is one of the more improvable physical capabilities, and even brief, regular practice can create meaningful change over just a few weeks. Now, let's move to our second exercise, something that addresses an area of the body many people don't realize plays such a central role in nearly every other movement they make. Number 2 on our list is the bird dog exercise, and I want to explain why this particular movement earns such strong recommendations from physical therapists specifically for core and lower back stability. Here's the science simplified. This exercise engages your deep core muscles and the muscles running along your spine simultaneously, while also challenging your balance and coordination in a controlled way. Strong, stable core muscles support nearly every other movement your body makes: walking, lifting, bending, twisting, and importantly, this exercise trains these muscles to stabilize your spine properly during movement, which may help reduce lower back discomfort, a concern many people over 60 experience regularly. Here's exactly how to do it, and please, ensure you have a comfortable, supportive surface beneath you, like an exercise mat or folded blanket. Begin on your hands and knees, with your hands positioned directly beneath your shoulders and your knees directly beneath your hips. Keeping your back flat and your core gently engaged, slowly extend one arm forward while simultaneously extending the opposite leg backward, reaching until both are roughly parallel to the floor or as far as feels comfortable and controlled. Hold this position for about 3 to 5 seconds, focusing on keeping your torso steady and level, rather than allowing your hips to rotate or your back to sag. Then, slowly return to your starting position and repeat on the opposite side. Continue alternating sides for about 8 to 10 repetitions on each side. I think of a patient, a woman named Josephine, 66 years old, who'd experienced chronic, mild lower back discomfort for several years, something she'd simply learned to manage with over-the-counter pain relievers without addressing the underlying cause directly. When we discussed her situation and assessed her core strength together, it became clear her deep core muscles had weakened considerably, likely contributing to some of her ongoing back strain. We introduced the bird dog exercise into her routine, practicing gently 3 times weekly. After about 10 weeks of consistent practice, Josephine mentioned her lower back discomfort had improved meaningfully, something she genuinely hadn't expected from what felt like such a subtle, controlled movement. She told me it had become one of her favorite exercises, specifically because she could feel it working, even though it never felt intense or exhausting. I want to reassure you, if getting onto your hands and knees feels challenging due to knee discomfort, please place a folded towel or cushion beneath your knees for added comfort, or discuss modified versions with your physical therapist. This exercise should feel controlled and stable throughout, never straining or painful. And now we've arrived at our final exercise, the one I promised you at the very beginning, the one geriatric specialists tell me they'd choose above all others if they could only recommend a single movement. Number 1 on our list is walking, specifically regular, brisk walking, and I want to explain why this simple, accessible activity earns such profound respect from researchers and physical therapists more than any single specialized exercise we've discussed today. Here's why this matters so significantly, and the science genuinely supports this enthusiasm. Walking engages nearly every major muscle group in your lower body simultaneously, while also providing meaningful cardiovascular benefit, supporting healthy blood pressure, blood sugar regulation, and heart health. It's associated with maintained bone density, since walking is a weight-bearing activity, which matters considerably for reducing osteoporosis risk as we age. It supports balance and coordination through the natural, complex movement pattern of walking itself. And remarkably, numerous studies have associated regular walking with better cognitive function and mood, likely through a combination of improved blood flow to the brain and the psychological benefits of regular movement and, often, time spent outdoors. I want to be honest with you. Walking doesn't require any special equipment, doesn't require a gym membership, and doesn't require any complicated technique to learn. Its accessibility is precisely part of why it's so powerfully effective. Nearly everyone can do some version of it, at whatever pace and distance feels appropriate for their own body. Here's my practical guidance. If you're currently not walking regularly, start small. Even 5 to 10 minutes daily is a wonderful beginning point. Gradually increase your duration and pace as your comfort and confidence improve, working toward 20 to 30 minutes most days if that feels achievable for your body. Walking with a friend, a spouse, or even a dog can make this feel less like exercise and more like an enjoyable part of your day, which often supports long-term consistency far better than viewing it as a chore. I think of a patient, a man named Samuel, 67 years old, who'd maintained impressive overall strength and independence throughout his 60s, someone I mentioned in a previous conversation as well, actually. When I asked about his routine, expecting perhaps something elaborate, he told me something refreshingly simple. He walked briskly most days for about 30 minutes, often with his wife in the evenings after dinner. Samuel's approach wasn't complicated or intense. It was simply consistent, moderate effort, applied patiently over years, and it showed remarkably in his overall health, his cardiovascular fitness, his balance, his mood, and his general vitality. I share Samuel's story because it genuinely illustrates something important about today's entire list. None of these 6 exercises require extreme effort or complicated equipment. What they require is consistency, patience, and a genuine commitment to showing up for your own body, a little bit, most days, over months and years. Let's bring everything together now, because we've covered quite a lot today, and I want this to feel clear, practical, and genuinely encouraging as we close. We talked about wall push-ups, supporting upper body strength for pushing, pressing, and catching yourself if needed. We talked about seated marching, strengthening your hip flexors to help prevent trips and stumbles. We talked about the sit-to-stand exercise, building the leg strength behind one of your most frequent daily movements. We talked about the single leg stance, directly supporting your balance and reducing fall risk. We talked about the bird dog exercise, strengthening your core and spine stability together. And finally, we talked about walking itself, perhaps the single most powerful, accessible exercise available to nearly everyone, supporting your heart, your bones, your balance, and even your mood, all simultaneously. I want to leave you with something important before we close today. You don't need to incorporate all 6 of these exercises perfectly into your routine starting tomorrow. That would be an unrealistic expectation, and honestly, I wouldn't ask that of my own patients either. Instead, I'd invite you to simply choose one. Maybe it's committing to a 10-minute walk tomorrow morning. Maybe it's practicing wall push-ups a few times this week. Maybe it's simply standing up from your chair today without using your hands, just once to see how it feels. Whatever feels most approachable to you right now, start there, and trust that small, consistent effort, practiced patiently over time, is genuinely how meaningful change happens. I also want to remind you, sincerely, that if you have any existing joint concerns, balance issues, or other health conditions, please speak with your doctor or physical therapist before beginning any new exercise routine. They can help ensure whatever you choose is genuinely safe and appropriate for your specific situation. If this video gave you something valuable today, even just one exercise you're curious to try, it would genuinely mean a great deal to me if you'd give it a like. It helps this information reach more people who deserve clear, encouraging, medically grounded guidance. And if you'd like more videos like this one, honest, practical, and made specifically with adults over 60 in mind, please consider subscribing. I create this content because I sincerely believe you deserve better, clearer health information delivered with genuine warmth and respect. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments below. Which of these 6 exercises are you planning to try first? Or do you already have a favorite movement that served you well over the years that you'd like to share with others watching today? Your experience genuinely helps other viewers feel motivated and less alone in this journey, more than you might realize. Take good care of your strength this week. Small, consistent effort, practiced patiently, genuinely makes a difference. And I'll see you again very soon, right here. Until then, I'm Dr. Richard Williamson, wishing you strength, steady steps, and good health ahead.